The American housing market is entering dangerous territory.
Not everywhere, not all at once, but in some cities, the warning signs are becoming impossible to ignore. Because housing markets don't collapse overnight. First, hiring slows. Then layoffs begin. Then buyers disappear. And finally, the homes stop selling. For years, people believed US real estate could only move in one direction. Up. During the pandemic, that belief became even stronger. Cheap money flooded the system. Interest rates dropped to historic lows. People rushed to buy homes. Remote workers moved across the country. Investors piled into real estate. And suddenly, cities that once felt affordable became some of the hottest markets in America. Home prices exploded. Entire neighborhoods transformed in just a few years. But underneath all of that growth, a dangerous dependency was forming. A dependency on high-paying jobs, especially in tech. Because the truth is, housing demand doesn't come from emotion. It comes from income. And when income disappears, demand disappears with it. Now in 2026, that risk is growing. Layoffs are spreading through industries that once seemed untouchable. Tech companies are cutting costs. Corporate hiring is slowing. Businesses are restructuring. And in some cities, the housing market is far more vulnerable than people realize. Today, we are counting down 10 US cities where layoffs could trigger a serious housing correction in 2026. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why some of America's fastest growing cities may soon face their biggest test yet. Starting with number 10, Denver, Colorado. Denver became one of the most desirable cities in America during the last decade. People were drawn to the mountains, the lifestyle, the expanding tech sector, and during the pandemic boom, demand accelerated dramatically. Remote workers moved in from expensive coastal cities. Home prices surged. Competition became intense. But here where things get interesting. Much of Denver's growth relied on high-income workers, especially people connected to tech and corporate sectors. Now imagine what happens when those industries begin slowing down. Suddenly, fewer buyers qualify for expensive mortgages. Fewer people relocate. Demand weakens. At the same time, inventory is quietly increasing. Homes are sitting longer on the market. Price reductions are becoming more common. And while Denver hasn't collapsed, the momentum that once pushed prices higher is fading. But Denver still has a diversified economy. The next city is dealing with something more fragile. Orlando, Florida. Orlando exploded during the migration boom. Thousands of people moved to Florida searching for lower taxes, warmer weather, and cheaper living costs. At first, it looked unstoppable. Homebuilders rushed to keep up with demand. Developers expanded aggressively. Investors bought properties expecting endless growth. But there was one major weakness. Local wages never truly matched the pace of rising home prices. A large portion of the market depended on incoming buyers. And now, that flow is slowing. Mortgage rates remain high. Monthly payments are becoming unaffordable for many families. And fewer people are relocating than before. At the same time, more homes are entering the market. And when supply rises while demand falls, prices begin to soften. Now add layoffs into that equation, especially layoffs affecting remote workers and middle-income households. Suddenly, the pressure increases. But Orlando is still manageable compared to what's happening in Dallas. Dallas, Texas, became one of the biggest growth stories in America. Corporations moved operations there. New residents arrived in huge numbers. Housing demand exploded. And builders responded aggressively. Entire communities appeared almost overnight. For years, it worked. But now, the environment is changing. Inventory levels are climbing fast. Buyers are becoming cautious. And builders are still trying to unload new homes. This creates a dangerous imbalance. Because when too many homes hit the market at once, competition increases. Sellers begin cutting prices. And once buyers realize prices may fall further, many choose to wait. That hesitation alone can slow a market dramatically. Now imagine layoffs entering the picture. Suddenly fewer people qualify for loans. Demand drops even more. And the pressure intensifies. But Dallas still has strong long-term fundamentals. The next city faces a different kind of danger. Tampa, Florida. Tampa became one of the hottest investor markets in America. Short-term rentals exploded. People rushed to buy second homes. Speculators entered the market hoping prices would continue climbing forever. And for a while, they did. But investor-driven markets behave differently. They depend heavily on confidence. When confidence is high, prices rise rapidly. But when uncertainty appears, investors move fast. Now financing costs are much higher. Rental profits are shrinking. Insurance costs in Florida continue rising. And suddenly, some investors are reconsidering their positions. If enough investors begin selling at the same time, supply could rise rapidly. And when inventory spikes in a slowing market, price declines can accelerate quickly. But Tampa isn't the most dangerous Florida market. Not even close. Because next comes Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix has experienced one of the most dramatic housing cycles in modern American history. It boomed before 2008, then crashed hard, then recovered. And during the pandemic, it exploded again. People flooded into Arizona seeking affordability compared to California. Prices skyrocketed. Construction surged. Developers built aggressively. And now, inventory is climbing again. That alone wouldn't necessarily be catastrophic. But Phoenix is highly sensitive to changes in demand. When buyers pull back, the market reacts quickly. And layoffs can speed that process up dramatically, especially when affordability is already stretched. The danger isn't just falling prices. It's momentum reversal. Because once a market shifts from fear of missing out to fear of overpaying, everything changes. And what comes next may be even more concerning. Because now we enter cities heavily dependent on high-income tech jobs. And that changes everything. Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas has always been a boom and bust city. When the economy is strong, it grows rapidly. When uncertainty appears, it reacts faster than most places in America. That's because the local economy depends heavily on tourism, entertainment, and external spending. Now combine that with rising housing costs, higher borrowing rates, and slowing consumer confidence, and the situation becomes fragile. The problem with fragile markets is this: They can look stable, right until they suddenly aren't. Las Vegas experienced devastating housing declines during the last major crash. And while conditions today are different, the city remains extremely sensitive to economic pressure, especially if layoffs spread nationally. But even Las Vegas may not face the level of risk building in Austin, Texas. Austin became the symbol of America's pandemic boom. Tech companies expanded aggressively there. Workers poured into the city. Home prices skyrocketed. People believed Austin had become the next Silicon Valley. And in many ways, it did. But that success created enormous vulnerability. Because Austin's housing market became deeply connected to one industry, tech. Now that industry is changing. Companies are cutting costs. Hiring is slowing. Layoffs are becoming more common. And suddenly, the exact workers who fueled Austin's housing explosion are facing uncertainty. Inventory is already rising. Price reductions are increasing. And some neighborhoods are seeing homes sit much longer than expected. This is where things start becoming dangerous. Because markets that rise extremely fast often struggle to stabilize smoothly. Sometimes they overshoot on the way down. And Austin may be one of the clearest examples of that risk. But now we move into the final three cities. The places where housing vulnerability and layoffs collide most intensely. Seattle, Washington. Seattle's economy is deeply connected to tech. For years, that created incredible wealth. High salaries supported extremely expensive homes. But when a housing market depends heavily on one sector, any weakness in that sector becomes a major threat. And right now, tech is under pressure. Artificial intelligence is reshaping employment. Corporate restructuring continues. Efficiency has become the priority. That means fewer workers. And even small reductions in high-income employment can have enormous effects on housing demand. Because in cities like Seattle, homes are expensive, very expensive, and expensive markets depend on constant inflows of high earners. Without them, the market weakens faster than people expect. But Seattle still has something San Jose lacks: relative diversification. Because San Jose sits directly at the center of Silicon Valley. And that makes it uniquely exposed. San Jose represents one of the most expensive housing markets in America. Prices reached extraordinary levels during the tech boom. And for years, high salaries justified those prices. But now the equation is changing. If layoffs increase across the tech industry, the number of buyers capable of purchasing million-dollar homes drops rapidly. At the same time, remote work has reduced the necessity of living directly in Silicon Valley. That shift matters more than many people realize. Because when demand softens in ultra-expensive markets, prices can move sharply, especially when affordability is already stretched to the limit. And finally, we arrive at number 1. San Francisco, California. Few cities symbolize the American tech economy more than San Francisco. For decades, it represented opportunity, innovation, and wealth creation. But today, the city faces mounting pressure from multiple directions. High living costs, population shifts, changing work patterns, and now, growing concerns around layoffs. The problem with San Francisco isn't just affordability. It's sensitivity. In highly expensive markets, even a modest decline in demand can create major pricing pressure, because there are simply fewer buyers able to absorb those costs. And if layoffs continue spreading through the tech sector, that buyer pool shrinks even more. Suddenly homes stay listed longer, price cuts increase, and confidence begins weakening. That's the part many people underestimate. Housing markets are psychological. When buyers believe prices always rise, they rush in. But when they believe prices may fall, they hesitate. And hesitation alone can slow an entire market. Now, to be clear, this doesn't necessarily mean a nationwide crash is coming. The United States housing market is not identical everywhere. Some cities remain stable. Some regions still have strong demand. But certain markets are undeniably more vulnerable than others, especially cities that experienced explosive growth during the pandemic. Cities heavily dependent on high-income sectors. Cities where affordability has already reached extreme levels. And cities where inventory is beginning to rise faster than demand. Because once layoffs enter the equation, weakness becomes visible very quickly. The biggest risk in 2026 may not be a national collapse. It may be selective corrections happening city by city, one market at a time. And sometimes, that's how major shifts begin. Quietly, slowly, then all at once. So the real question is no longer whether some housing markets are vulnerable. The real question is, which city will crack first? If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe for more deep dive economic analysis. And let me know in the comments, which US city do you think faces the biggest housing risk in 2026?